And I'm just going to start out by saying that this one is also my own personal pick of the week, and I have a few reasons for that, but the biggest one is that I have already played this game. I was lucky enough to play this one at a convention, and I was taught by the designer himself, and I'm also just really impressed with this one because this is a first-time designer, and I think the game that he came up with is not only a ton of fun, but also offers something different than a lot of other worker placement Euro games out there. Not only that, but I also absolutely love the theme on this one because in this game, players are different scientists competing to stop an asteroid before it hits the planet. And there are different ways that you can try and stop this asteroid. You could either destroy it with a laser, build a shield to deflect it, or just let the asteroid hit the planet and focus on evacuation. There's going to be different project tracks for each of these, and the progress that you make up that track is your contribution to that specific project. You'll be gaining all sorts of bonuses and victory points just for simply moving up any of these tracks, but if you also happen to make a significant investment in the actual project that ends up stopping the asteroid, then that can also gain you a bunch of victory points at the end of the game as well. Another layer on top of this that took me by surprise and I thought was a really cool mechanism in this game is that the way that you check the success of each of these projects is in a particular order. So first you're going to be checking the success of the laser, and if it fails, then you're going to be checking the success of the shield. But if the laser did enough damage, it could actually weaken the asteroid, making the shield's chance of success even easier. But then if neither of those succeed, then it's going to be up to the evacuation. But like I said, this one is a worker placement game, but something that's neat about this is that all your workers are always out on the board because they're either going to be located on the planet or located on the moon. Depending on where that worker is located, it's only going to have access to the worker location spots at that location. Some of the actions will have an icon on them indicating that when you use that action, it will automatically send you to the other side of the board, but players can freely do this as well if they do have the energy to spend in order to do it. But these aren't the only actions that players can take on their turn because each player will also be able to purchase cards throughout the game, and cards can be used once per round, and there's 3 different types of cards that you can gain. There's action cards which can give you additional actions on your turn, but then there are the boost cards which will augment certain actions that you take, and then there are cards that just give you different criteria for additional victory points and endgame scoring at the end of the game. Alternatively, some of these cards do also have different icons on them, and during your turn, instead of using it for its boost or its action, you can choose to discard it in order to gain the resources on that card. The different actions available out on the board will allow you to do all sorts of different things, like even purchase these cards, but one thing to note when doing that is that the cost of your next card does increase depending on the number of cards that you currently have in possession. But the other actions you can perform are to gain resources of different types, or even gain different tokens that act sort of like reusable resources, but then you can also invest in the various tracks to move you up that specific project track. But players will also have their own personal player boards, and they can use actions to interact with those boards in order to purchase various upgrades. And the upgrades could allow you to pay less resources for other actions, gain victory points for meeting certain requirements or taking certain actions. But one of the most important things you can do on your player board is to increase these 5 tracks located on the left-hand side of your board, because each of these tracks is going to correlate with one of the different types of resources in the game. And the higher that track is, the more of that resource you're going to be gaining for free at the start of each round. And one thing to note about the different action spaces out on the board is that a lot of these locations are blocking, which means that if someone has already taken that location, then you're not allowed to go there. And this is important to note because this means that you will probably want to prioritize the board actions before you take your card actions, because like I said, players do take turns performing one action, and if you choose to do a card action before placing your meeple out on a location, someone might take that location before you. Of course, this may not always be the most optimal strategy, and that's where a lot of the really fun decisions come into play in this game, because you might want to play one of your action cards first in order to put you in a better position for your next action, but that is a risk that you might have to take. Once all the players have performed all the actions they're able to perform, you're going to be moving into the end of the round, where the asteroid is always going to be moving forward 1 space and then activating any icons on that space. And it's at this point that you're going to be determining the progress on the various projects, as well as any additional progress on the asteroid track. Because something I didn't mention yet is that this game does also incorporate a bit of shared bag building, because you're going to be starting with a bag with a bunch of asteroid cubes in it, And as the asteroid moves over different icons on this track, that could add even more into the bag. Luckily, anytime that a player moves up any of those 3 project tracks, a token of that color is also going to get put into that bag. And then at the end of the round, a number of tokens are going to be drawn from that bag, depending on which round that it is. If you draw a project cube, then it's going to get added to the project progress track, which is a separate project track that tracks the actual success of that project so far. But if an asteroid cube's drawn, then that asteroid's going to be moving an additional space, potentially triggering even more effects. And you may have noticed these face down tiles here on the right hand side of the board, and what these are additional action locations that will become available as the game moves forward, because as the asteroid moves over the icon matching those tiles, that tile is going to get flipped up. But what's really neat about these tiles is that they are randomized at the start of the game, and there's even more than just the 4 tiles you see here, which is going to add a lot of variety from game to game, and that's going to keep the players on their toes, having to use different strategies depending on the different options that come available. But the game continues like this over a series of rounds until the impact of that asteroid is imminent, and then you're going to be checking each of the projects one by one to see if any of them succeed. The way you do this is that you're going to be drawing a number of tokens from the bag, and then any that match the laser first are going to get added to the laser track, but also any asteroid tokens will also get added to that track, helping in its success. If the track is completely full at that time, then it has successfully destroyed the asteroid and it has become the successful project. But if not, then you're going to be putting the blue and green cubes back into the bag and then redrawing. This process continues until you get to that final track, and then you'll be checking the victory points of all the players. Then the player with the most victory points at that point wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, it's definitely one that I recommend. And like I said, I have played it and I do vouch for it, and I think it's a fantastic game. And you can go ahead and click that notify me button in order to get notified of its launch.